parts of this series. This will be the eighth one, but this is going to be a fun video. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, you should go watch the other seven shorts. It's only 7 minutes. It doesn't take very long. I'm just, in those videos, I'm going over the many Robins of Batman. So, what is my favorite Robin overall? And this is where I'm going to go really in depth and talk about the many Robins and what I like about them, and just some general information. Or if I don't like them at all. And I'm going to start with the weakest link here, obviously. I'm going to start with part 7, the group of Robins, 12 whole Robins. It was an animated series in a world that either doesn't have Batman, or in the future where it's Batman versus Superman, where these Robins basically come after Carrie Kelly. They're all forgettable. They don't really. I can't remember any of their names. There's 12 of them. They're all racial stereotypes. They're all very poorly written. This was a group of Robins that were written by an upcoming artist, who would later go on to not have a career in comic books and not have a career in art, and also fail in his career of music. So that should tell you right there how good this guy is. The 12 Robins, the three of them I remember. There was, oh no, there was actually, there was one other one I remember. There was a Native American girl who was really annoying for some reason. I don't remember why, but I remember she was just like kind of always angsty and arguing. I don't remember anything else about her. There was a Asian kid who was good at math. Just racial stereotype. There was a white kid who played as the lead Robin, I guess you could say, who was on a dirt bike. That was his thing, was dirt biking and like motocross and white people stuff. So another poorly written racial stereotype. Why was he the leader? No particular reason, because realistically he wasn't good at anything to do with a Robin. He could just run people over with a motorbike, which I'm sure Batman would not approve of. But these were teens that were not supervised, trained, or anything to do with Batman. So it's not even fair to call them a Robin of Batman, because they weren't. And then the second lead would be a black teen who plays football, who's strong and stuff. Another racial stereotype. And it also goes into the social stereotype about jocks being dumb, stupid, and bully like. So, and then, of course, the white kid and the black kid are always arguing and fighting. This show was entirely racial stereotypes. It was a really bad animated movie where it was so bad that they took 5 whole episodes. Cartoon Network did. They looked at this, they're like, oh, this is crap. Nobody's going to like this. But Cartoon Network was in an experimental stage. This was before Teen Titans. I was like 5. I was 5 or 4 years old, and I really thought this movie was terrible. And clearly everybody else did too, because you see it absolutely nowhere. It's gone from history. Most people, I doubt I could find anybody who knows what I'm talking about. I doubt I can even find it on the internet. But this movie was about 2 hours long. It was 5 whole episodes spliced together of what should have been an animated series. Cartoon Network looked at this and went, we are not going to commit to your TV series. There's no way anybody's going to be interested in this. Cartoon Network thought it was crap. Children thought it was crap. Years and years later, it's erased in history. These Robins in that version appear before Carrie Kelly and in the modern day era, and the other version they appear after Carrie Kelly. there's not much to talk about here. That's why I started with them first. They're the weakest link. So the 5 episodes spliced together, no commercials between each episode. It was just advertised as a cartoon movie, and Cartoon Network showed like maybe 3 advertisements for it, and that was it. It was the dimly lit candle of unoriginality waiting to be snuffed out by the wet dreams of poor writing, to put it bluntly. Usually when you say something's bad, whether it's a video game or a movie or a TV series, there's something to fix. There's some redeeming quality. The worst insult that you can give somebody is that your thing is boring. Because when you have something that's boring, there is no way to improvement. It's dead. And that's exactly what this was. Now, to talk about probably my least favorite Robin, because, I'm going to talk about him next, because I don't want this to be an overwhelmingly negative video. I want to move on into a positive light towards the end of the video. So, my least favorite Robin, of course, is Damian Wayne. A lot of fans express this. He's snotty, he's bratty, he's selfish, he's kind of schemy. You know, he is brutal because he grew up with the League of Shadows, which is understandable that he has all these overwhelming negative traits. One of the most definitive deaths for Dick Grayson is being killed by Damian Wayne. So, that also is like another strike against Damian Wayne. And it's also one of probably the most disrespectful deaths in comic book history because it's one of the lamest. Damian in the Injustice timeline throws a rock at Dick Grayson and it catches Dick Grayson by surprise. This guy dodges bullets, is an acrobatic martial artist who actually was able to, at one time, beat Batman in a fight before becoming Nightwing and again after becoming Nightwing. In fact, Batman would test himself, and, well, Dick Grayson would test himself by fighting against each other for sparring and practice sake. Needless to say, the Damian shouldn't have been able to kill Dick Grayson in the weakest, lamest way. And to say that it's an accident is an injustice, because an accident is when you did everything correct, everything that you should have done, and then something still happens. An accident is not when you do something stupid and then something stupid happens. That's not an accident, that's just stupidity. That's a mistake. Okay? Batman would reasonably have trust issues with Damian. And, of course, Starfire would be none too pleased as well. And Dick Grayson would also, not only cease to exist, but then Damian Wayne would go on to run his mouth at Jason Todd. And here's the thing, Jason Todd and Damian Wayne have something in common. They're both more brutal as Robins than any of the other Robins were. Both are willing to kill. So you think it would be like match made in heaven. But very quickly, Jason Todd proves to be a valuable asset to the Bat family. A reasonable individual who just feels that justice can go a little bit further into the vengeful territory. Where, and that does come out of anger, rage, and things in other places, but it's very controlled and methodical. Damian is a spastic. And that's not a slight towards anybody with ADHD or autism. Two things I have, by the way. No, no, no. I mean like the classic cartoon character, Looney Tunes ass spastic. Okay, he is all over the place. So of course he runs his mouth to Jason Todd. Jason Todd beats the ever living snot out of him, and it's not a fair fight. This is a League of Shadows trained assassin child. So in other words, edge lord brat versus a adult grizzled veteran of a man who's seen things, done things, and as at one point even beaten Batman in a fight. That's kind of a really big deal. He's only done it once, by the way. You know, if unless you count a comic book series where in an alternative timeline, Jason Todd actually manages to kill Batman and becomes a psycho killer Batman. But regardless, Jason Todd way outclasses him in every way. He outclasses him in way, just in weight, age, height, experience, skill, speed, agility, strength, everything. In every step, he absolutely pummels Damian, absolutely humbles him. Afterwards, Damian would go on to be murdered by his own clone. Kind of disappointing. You're the original product. You're Talia al Ghul's rape baby because yes, Talia al Ghul did that to Bruce Wayne. Thanks for that, Talia, you terrible human being. But she would clone him and accelerate the aging process of the clone. So Damian grows as a child, is trained by the League of Shadows, is trained by Batman, is given a bunch of gadgets, has every basic opportunity to win this fight. Whereas Talia puts a clone in a vat, ages him up, and gives him some bare bones training last minute, and then go and throws him at Damian to basically just be a distraction. And this super clone, by the way, be named Heretic. Damian should have won that fight, but he doesn't. He dies, and then his body gets stolen by Darkseid, and he's resurrected and becomes a little child tyrant. And then later would return to Batman with a couple superhuman powers, but those would wear off. And then he would quit. He would just straight up quit. Like, oh, I'm done being Robin. Fuck this. I'm going to quit for no reason. I'm going to leave. And we don't really get any information beyond that besides that he just disappears. He probably went back to League of Shadows. Or maybe he ran off with Bruce's money. Or maybe he did something else. We don't really know. Maybe we'll have comics in the future that gives us more storyline with him. Hopefully not, because nobody likes this character. He's not poorly written. He's actually well written, despite how Dick Grayson ends up dying. That's poorly written, but he's well written. It's just the character. It's almost as if he was written to be designed as a character that we would hate. It's like a sidekick comic relief character that was written to be funny, but the joke just doesn't land. The joke just doesn't stick. Where and it's just kind of like he's a worse version of Jason Todd. Like he has all the negative qualities of any Robin, but none of the benefit. You know, and I know that's overwhelmingly negative. I know we're 15 minutes in now, and you would think there would be something better to say here. Moving on, we've moved past the group of racial stereotypes, and we've moved past the Robin who doesn't excel at anything other than murdering people. and sometimes on accident too. We get to the first Robin, Dick Grayson. And let's talk about this guy. Dick Grayson is very intelligent, has some considerable degree of detective skill, but he had some trauma becoming Robin. And in that regard, Dick Grayson has his strengths and his weaknesses. He was a kind hearted individual, very relaxed, mostly chill, and would actually influence Batman greatly. You know, he had a problem with how Batman did things. He felt Batman was just too brutal all the time and too intense all the time. And that's what caused him to leave and become Nightwing. And there's a great deal of respect for Dick Grayson, also known as Robert Grayson. He did, of course, start the Teen Titans, and there's even a funny one-liner between him and Starfire in the animated series. She's like, "How do you get Dick from, Robert Grayson?" And he replies with a straight-up adult joke. He's like, "You ask nicely." He's smooth talker and he's funny, but he's always a kind individual. In the Batman animated TV series, he was the first to forgive Harley, and in a children's cartoon on Cartoon Network in the early 90s, by the way, he would fool around with Harley, Harleen Quinzel. Yeah, he was willing to forgive and forget with villains and with people. When in the comics with Harley Quinn, when she became her own side duo and was also girlfriend to Poison Ivy and became friends with the Bat family and arguably one of the most valuable members, offering psychology and understanding their problems and things. Nightwing was one of the first to forgive her and actually accept her presence. There's comic relief moments. There's moments where he has some really just full on smooth as buttercream one liners, just things that you could imagine James Bond spitting out. And then there's moments where he's surprisingly badass. He goes from this relax when the chips are down, he becomes like Goku. When the chips are down, he stops having stupid quips and funny moments to really sorting people out. Arguably one of the best Robins. There are people who say he is the best Robin, and he's a lot of people's favorite Robin for good reason. His death is the most disappointing of all. And there's other versions and other ways he's died in the comics, but been resurrected in other things. There's even a version where he never dies. But, you know, this character goes on. And this character is timeless. He was there in the beginning, all the way back to the Adam West TV series. And he'll be there long after I'm dead. Okay. You will die before the legend of Dick Grayson dies. His story will always be rewritten, and he will always be a well crafted character. There's a lot to work with, you know, and he's timeless. The character stories and things, whether no matter what version we talk about, continue on and jive well with the newer, younger audiences and with the older audiences. It just doesn't get tiring with him. Next, we get into Carrie Kelly. This is a lesser known Robin, and which is a little sad, but I can understand why. This is in an alternative timeline where Batman retires after Jason Todd's death and then later returns to being Batman as an old man, beats up Superman, does things that are arguably un-Batman like, and even considers killing people. Really adopting the lessons of Jason Todd, I guess. In his old age, he's had enough. He even kills the Joker at one point. Carrie Kelly saves his ass, and he threatens, "Oh, I'll fire you. I'll give up on you, or go away," to Carrie Kelly all the time. And Carrie Kelly, as a Robin, is very ingenuitive, more so than any Robin. Dick Grayson has a mix of fantastic acrobatics. He excels in the martial arts area, and he has some good detective skills, almost as good as Batman. He excels overall as an overall good Robin. You know, that's what he excels at. But what Carrie Kelly excels at is just sheer ingenuity. She's always pulling a trick out of her ass. It's amazing. She just proves to just be this invaluable asset, and she never really gets the treatment she deserves from Batman. She doesn't even, and she's used to it because she doesn't get the treatment she deserves from her own parents. Her own parents are like, "Hey, didn't we have a kid at one point?" That's how neglectful they are. They forget she even exists. Unlike other Robins where they've had their parents murdered, or their parent is Talia al Ghul supervillain, or something crazy, or they're an orphan, like with Stephanie Brown. Carrie Kelly has parents. They're just forgetful and neglectful, which is a shame because they have amazing, excellent child. One of the brightest. Her parents are fat, stupid, and lazy, and she's just full on like Velma esque character. She looks like Velma too. She's got big old glasses like Velma, and she's got orange hair. And terribly and one of the things that I'm going to complain about is she always seems to pick the skimpy costumes. You know, Dick Grayson had this horrible tights and exposed spandex ass costume, and then later, Jason Todd had a little more protective costume, and then the Damien had a much more appropriate costume. Probably was the least deserving of it. Carrie Kelly has Dick Grayson's costume, and it's not leaving much to the imagination, especially on a young female. I wish the writers went with something else, But then again, I wish the same thing with Dick Grayson's costume in general. But I guess it's nostalgia, or it's just a relic of the past that keeps getting brought in somehow. It's very skimpy. It's nah, not the best costume for crime fighting. Carrie Kelly would later go on to be Catgirl, not the same Catgirl who fought Wonder Woman, but would adopt a very similar look. And Carrie Kelly chose for a costume to be a spandex cheetah print leotard completed with a helmet. So I guess she's a furry. Oh, and roller skates. Just skin tight spandex. Oh, and an arm cannon that shoots batarangs. This character will sit there and make a bomb in a flash to blow down a door. She will find things nearby that she needs to accomplish the goal that she needs. She's like a little Navy SEAL. You just give her, the bare bones basic equipment, and she'll just make it happen with anything she finds around her. But the outfits she chooses for herself, because she's chosen all of her outfits ever, are very bare bones. I mean, you got spandex tights Robin, and then you got latex leotard cheetah print pet play furry fetish on rollerblades with an arm cannon. As a young female, I guess she was a mess. Just like, just dress appropriately, girl. You would have been better off in jeans and boots here, okay? Uh, Hell, Jason Todd actually adopts that at one point where he's wearing like jeans, boots, and he's got tactical gear on, and like just and then the chest plate, that part is high tech, where all his vital organs and everything, that's like a high tech nanofiber suit that can stand up to some rifle rounds. You know, it can even stand up to armor. It's better than 3A armor plates, and 3R armor plates are really good. And then his suit is like designed to not just deflect bullets, but also absorb bullets, as need be. His suit, when it gets hit by a rifle round that can't penetrate, it doesn't explode on impact, because one of the worst things with 3A suits, right, with 3A plates is spackling, and that's when the bullet hits and it's stopped by the plate, but the pieces break off of the bullet, and so this bullet that hit here breaks off, and now you got metal pieces coming up, hitting you in the throat, hitting you in the face, all these things. Same reason why the military moved on to using ceramic plates. They're lighter, and you don't have this issue. Jason Todd has nanofibers, right? He chose that for himself. They absorb the bullet, save his life. Carrie Kelly in her two costumes have no protection at all. They're not even like Jason Todd's nanofiber. They're not ceramics. There's nothing. And it costs her at some point. She has a near-death experience where she almost dies. Okay, really, really comes close to dying. And maybe that finally rubbed off on her, and she, would have worn more protection. But no, she chooses the Catgirl costume, and it's like she's trying to come on to Batman, and he's just an oblivious, old, decrepit man. I mean, at this point, he almost looks like a cross between Bruce Wayne from Batman Beyond, with the cane and everything, always angry and grumpy, and a cross between that with Spencer from Resident Evil. Really, really, just you know. Uh, but then she would go on to adopt the mantra of Batwoman, not Batgirl, Batwoman. That's and at that time she's an adult, and she would take the place of Batman, and she would wear a much more tactic cool, and I'm gonna say that because it was very similar to Batman's costume, but it was fitted a lot more appropriately to a woman, of course. Uh, Not skimpy bullshit, but like actual armor. Very visible tactical boots, very visible tactical gauntlets, augmented exoskeleton built into the suit to increase her strength so that she could have much more agility, but it could also have the strength to go toe to toe with mutants who are almost as strong as Bane, and really just well-rounded suit. When you look at the design suit, it looks like it has a steel chest plate, or maybe even Jason Todd's nanofibers. You look at the gauntlets, protective. The cowl is not Batman's cowl; it's a helmet. Like, it looks like a cowl, but it has actual protection. Way better design. Maybe that was just like her younger days of wearing really skimpy clothing for some reason, and as an adult she matured. Great character. Even as Batwoman, still doesn't get the recognition she deserves. Kind of, I guess that's the running gag, and it's a little funny. Actually, it's quite hilarious. But just somebody throw her a bone. In the New 52, she doesn't exist yet. You know, which she was always an alternate storyline character, but that's a good one, a well written one, and one with a lot of funny moments. And for some people, the very few that know of her, a fan favorite, more so than Dick Grayson, more so than Jason Todd. And Then, then we have Stephanie Brown. Stephanie Brown, what she excelled at was technology itself, was hacking, those sort of things. And she'd become the new Batgirl. She'd replace, Barbara Gordon, Commissioner Gordon's daughter. Because, of course, Barbara Gordon ends up in a wheelchair and becomes the Oracle, and actually a much better technologist than, Bruce Wayne's butler. And that's no disrespect to, you know, Batman's butler, who for some reason, has a brain fart, I can't remember his name, which is hilarious because he's one of the most important characters ever. But she goes on to be really technologically advanced and even saves Batman's life at one point. But she has kind of this hit and miss relationship with Tim Drake, betraying him at one point, helping him at another, just, falling into a shady crowd, all over the place. She's got three kind of argue, arguably definitive deaths. And this is a difficult one. One version, she is Tim Drake's wife and even has a kid. And most fans don't know this. This is in the Batman Beyond animated movie where Terry McGinnis fights arguably the best version of the Joker, and I'll explain that one in a minute. I know you guys are going to be irritated in the comment section ranting about how I'm wrong. But just retires, probably dies of old age, natural causes or something. Another version, she kills a vampire Nightwing, and in doing so makes the vampire plague worse and becomes a vampire herself and is exterminated along with the rest of the vampires. And in another version, she's beaten to death, tortured to death by Black Mask. And fans argue, oh, she actually went to Africa to get treatment and she doesn't die. And other fans argue that she did, in fact, die. And actually, the correct answer is, depending on which comic timeline we follow, she does die. And, in the other version, the other fans are correct. So both groups are correct. They just don't realize that there's two separate timelines. Not really a well written or well known character, and she's this untrustworthy character. And Batman, there's another version where her retirement is, as a teenager, you're done. You're done being a superhero. We can't trust you. Blah, 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 blah. Batman rattles off these reasons, and that's it. That's the end of her story as a superheroine. Daughter of Cluemaster. Cluemaster is not an A-lister villain. Most people don't know he exists. He came about at a point after Riddler dies, you know, and he kind of fills the niche of Riddler, except he doesn't do riddles, he does clues and, real subtle placement of things, real subtle hints and things like that. Kind of like Riddler, but way worse. And by the way, how does Riddler die? He gets murdered by the Joker for some reason or another. A lot of there's a lot of fluff and filler. She's a character that was written, and she was good at something. She's really good at something, and she had an interesting story. I like Carrie Kelly better than I like Stephanie Brown, but Stephanie Brown was well written. But unfortunately, she was written to try to fluff up a pretty lackluster villain, a total B-lister villain. And, speaking of Tim Drake comes about and he has a lot of interesting stuff. Tim Drake in one version becomes the best Joker ever, and I'll explain that in a minute. I know I've said that already. But first off, his parents, his mother and father, there's several different versions of how they die, but they're either way, they're gymnasts. They're into gymnastics. They did it for the circus, and in doing so, they got murdered by Two Face in one version, murdered by Black Mask in another version, you know, or by the Joker in yet another version, depending on which version you can think of. And at any rate, Tim Drake will struggle not to kill the particular villain that's responsible. There's even a version where the Riddler did it, and so on. And Tim Drake, what he excelled at overall was detective skills. He wasn't as good of a gymnast as Dick Grayson. He wasn't as good of a martial artist. He wasn't as brutal or as strong as Jason was, but he was a much better detective than both of them. He was arguably sometimes pointing out things that even Batman missed. He was really good as a detective. When it came to forensics and analyzing crime scenes and all of those things, he did that extremely well. And, he had a fairly decent costume as Robin. Certainly better than Dick's, and it was better than Jason's. It was more well-rounded, had protection, and was probably the overall predecessor to Damien's costume. Damien would make a lot of tactical decisions of his costume that shows he was someone of skill. Tim didn't really have those skills to add that final finesse. But Tim would be indispensable. He would go on in one version of Timeline's events, he would go on to become the Red Baron. When he's had enough of Batman's nonsense, and he would be really excellent as the Red Baron, proving to actually probably be Batman's equal, if not better. And in terms of combat, again, he didn't excel at that, but he didn't need to, because he was just that much better as a detective. He was solving crimes that Batman probably would have blundered into. Well-written character on the Red Baron side of things. In another version of Timeline, he gets abducted by the Joker and brainwashed by the Joker into basically mini-me, and kills the Joker. But the Joker had implanted a device that was causing the brainwashing. It wasn't actually the physical and chemical process that Bruce Wayne originally thought. And in this version, he would go on 40 years later to become the best Joker. Now, this is in the 50s. This is, 50-year-old Joker. Now, why is this the best Joker? Because when Batman first fights the Joker, in terms of physicality, just sheer physicality alone, the Joker's 60. He's 60 years old, and he's been drinking, he's been smoking, he does drugs, he fell in a vat of chemical acid in one version. But no matter how you look at it, he's led a life that's taxing on the body. It's not good for the body. In another version, he's even half starved and poor. In another version, he's a crack addict. But in every version of the Joker, he's always been older than Batman. Batman, who's in his early 20s or, late 30s. This guy is been in his 60s and 70s. He's always been Batman's superior in age. And he's always lived some form of lifestyle that's not healthy. And in one version, he's actually been around since before Batman. And, in the Batman, the Tim Burton movie, Batman, he's a gangster who, of course, falls in a chemical vat. There's multiple versions, but he's not physically better than Batman. He's just way more experienced. So Tim Drake becoming the Joker with all of these experiences and things, being 50 years old. Here's the thing about Tim Drake. Tim Drake, as a Robin, was in excellent physical condition, And as an adult, he continued to exercise, eat his, greens and Wheaties. Okay, this guy kept himself in good, clean shape, something the Joker has never done. The other thing is the Joker doesn't have certain skills. He doesn't have certain muscle memory reflexes that the Robins and Batmans and Batwomans and Batgirls would have. Okay. But Tim Drake has all of these. And Tim Drake has really excellent detective skills. And so when Joker, with his little microchip on Tim Drake's neck, takes over, he gains all of those. He gains all the things that would have given him an edge over Batman, and the Bruce Wayne Batman would not have been able to defeat this version of the Joker, even if he was in his prime. That's just the reality of it. Because he gains all the things that he never had to be able to beat Batman. He has a body that's in such physical shape and everything. He has all the detective skills. He has the muscle memory for the combat aspect. He has everything. And Terry McGinnis has something that Bruce Wayne didn't. Terry McGinnis has a sense of humor, a really good sense of humor, you know. And the Joker, he's always been annoyed or pet peeved by the other Robins, and they've always been able to get under his skin a little bit, but not to the point where they lose control. Terry, on the other hand, he's such a good shit talker. He riles this version of the Joker's anger to the point where he is losing control. And Terry uses every advantage he can get out of it. He fights dirty, he talks shit, he completely catches him off guard. Terry is the best successor to Bruce Wayne as Batman. Whether you guys want to admit that or not. But after these events, Tim Drake would go on to retire quietly with his wife, Stephanie Brown, who was this at one point the other Robin, the fourth Robin. Now, that being said, Tim Drake was a decent Robin overall. He excelled at his things, and both versions of his alternate storylines are really interesting. There's more different storylines. I don't want to get into all of those. But either way, he's a well-written character, and he's really great. And he does prop up Batman. And when he goes on, he has lesser-known stories outside of Batman, but they're all really excellent, and they're all really entertaining. That's one of my favorite Robins. Tim Drake is a great successor to the other Robins. Now we get into his predecessor, arguably my favorite Robin, which is Jason Todd. And Jason Todd, it's an interesting case because if he had come before Dick Grayson, him and Batman would have gotten along well. He was brutal. He was stronger, and he was angrier, and he was a little bit more edgy. He's probably one of the edgiest Robins ever. I liked him back when he was Robin a little bit, but I could understand why people hated him because you're coming off of Dick Grayson and going into Jason Todd. And Dick Grayson had these great one-liners and smooth, just a smooth individual, and was good at a lot of things. Dick Grayson was, if you brought him in for a job to screw in some doors, he was a hammer. It's like taking screws and hammering them into the wall. He's a blunt force object. He's brutal. Instead of just, putting guys in handcuffs and tying them up, he was like breaking their arms and legs and leaving them on the ground scattered. You know, Dick Grayson got flack from villains as a Robin, and he would pop a one-liner. He'd smart mouth them and catch them right back. Dick Grayson had some great one-liners, and Jason Todd, he had his own one-liners, but they were a lot more edgy, some of them were funny. There's one incident with the Penguin where he's smart mouse. Oh, you got another pint-sized sidekick. Small little boy, and Jason Todd pops a one-liner about him being a fat, sad, angry old man midget and breaks his nose. He Jason Todd did not let anything slide, to say in the least. And there's different origin stories for him, but my favorite one is probably the time Jason Todd became Robin by stealing the hubcaps off the Batmobile. Total gutter punk. Um, just he had a little bit of gangster in him, to say the least. And I enjoyed that when he was a Robin. And the story, of course, he gets resurrected by the Lazarus Pit after being beaten to death by the Joker. This is a guy who is already brutal and already devastating. Um, and in the Marvel comics, there's their version of the Lazarus Pit. Um, and when it revives people, they're worse than they were before. If you've seen the Netflix animated series, or not the animated, excuse me, if you've seen the Netflix live series of Daredevil, you'll understand what I'm talking about. These characters come back. Same thing with Iron Fist, Wilson Fisk and another guy. And of course, Matt Murdock's love interest. They all come back, but they're worse. They're worse as human beings. Each time you come back from that thing, that special pit, you come back a little bit worse. The reason why I bring this up is the Lazarus Pit works the same way. Ra's al Ghul, probably before the first time he died, was probably a reasonable individual. And I say that because even as he is, he's still reasonable. He can be reasoned and bargained with. He's gonna do evil things. He's kind of like Doctor Doom in that regard, but if you bargain or reason with him, it can be done. Just like with Doctor Doom. And actually, Ra's al Ghul is a bad guy. I want to be clear. Doctor Doom, if you look at him in the comics and you look at Reed Richards, you realize that Reed Richards is actually a super villain, and Doctor Doom is not such a bad guy. He just sees a way to make things right in a way that is not correct. Where now, in Ra's al Ghul's case, not so much, but Ra's al Ghul does some pretty fucked up crap. One of the things that he does do that's really fucked up is he brings back Jason Todd, knowing full well that Jason Todd is going to be a lot worse than he was before. And yeah, he was. He became a killer. He probably did one of my favorite things in one of the animated movies. He targets Black Mask. He controls the crime ring and everything. He actually legitimately brings stability. He does try to shoot Black Mask with a rocket launcher, and Black Mask barely survives. And Black Mask is so desperate to get rid of this Red Hood character that Jason Todd becomes that he goes on to even get the Joker released from prison. Okay, which was a huge mistake, by the way. This is exactly what the Red Hood wanted. But there's one incident during this film where he hits Black Mask with acid and it melts the mask to his face. So there's no longer any taking off the Black Mask and hiding your identity. He's just stuck as Black Mask now. Like that's it. Jason Todd is this character who, as the Red Hood, I mentioned his breastplate and how it's designed. His hood itself, excellent craftsmanship. It can, survive being shot at. It can also, be used as a bomb on command. And he's used that to get out of dangerous situations. He's used that to, as an intentional attack. He's used that in a variety of ways. But even when they get the mask off, you get the mask off and you realize, oh shit, this is the old Robin who was breaking arms and breaking legs. And, this was the version of Robin that sat there and was like, I will, break you. And he did. He did a lot of that. He didn't let fucking anything slide ever. Damian Wayne pops off his mouth to Jason Todd, and Jason Todd, he didn't let that slide either. He absolutely pummels Damian. Dick Grayson could always beat him in a fight, but every fight between Dick Grayson and Jason Todd was bloody. Every single last one. Every one of those left Dick Grayson just a little more scarred and a little bit more of not feeling so great. Not only that, Jason Todd, he went on, after being resurrected, he went on, traveled around the world just like Bruce Wayne did, learned every martial art that he could. But unlike Bruce Wayne, instead of just learning, how to subdue people and methodologies and that, he learned everything else. He learned assassination. He learned everything he could. He learned things from, the League of Shadows. He learned things in one comic book version. Jason Todd even learned things from Cobra Commander, because yes, there is a comic universe out there where G.I. Joe, DC Universe, and the Transformers are all wrapped up into one. But he traveled around the world, learned all of these things, all these skills that even Batman didn't have, and he used them to great effect. There's a comic book where Jason Todd kills the Batman. There's a comic book where Jason Todd beats the Batman in a fight. The Red Hood goes toe to toe with Dick Grayson multiple times, sometimes as sparring, in some comics as an attempt on Nightwing's life. There's a comic book out there where there is no Batman because, the Red Hood killed Batman, and now it's just down between Nightwing and the Red Hood, with the Red Hood being the main antagonist. This character, too, the other thing with Jason Todd is he was willing to go just that extra little distance. And so, probably the closest thing that we have to a death for him would be the only thing that I can really think of. It's very indefinitive. There's a lot of maybe he died, maybe he didn't moments. But he started using Bane juice. Now, in the Batman Beyond animated series, we know that Bane juice leaves people not great physical condition. And of course, Bane is like in a retirement home and is not doing so great. He can't fight anybody. He can't do any of that. There's an improved formula that doesn't have as much drawbacks, but if you do more of it to the level that Bane was doing, you would just have your heart would just fucking explode and you would die. But Jason Todd often kept a steady formula and supply of the Bane juice, and this formula would be, a formula from the time that there was a crossover between DC and Marvel, in which case Bane became infected with the Venom symbiote. This would be the best version of Bane, by the way. This would be the only version that overcame the Venom juice to the point, because being affected with both Venom from Spider-Man and having the Bane Venom juice, his physiology permanently became that way. He didn't no longer need the juice. And here's the other thing, Bane uses this juice as a crutch. Jason doesn't really need the juice, he just uses it to give him a little bit bonus in every area. Jason, of course, much better at also blending in. Bruce Wayne uses, of course, his identity as Bruce Wayne to do things, but he's a famous celebrity. Dick Grayson, not very good at disguises. Doesn't really do those. He just kind of shows up and then sees things from distant. Terry McGinnis is really good at disguises. But Terry McGinnis was never a Robin. Terry is good at asking questions, doing actual detective work, and keeping things under the radar. So the only Robin who's good at both detective work and disguises is Jason. The moment he takes off the Robin costume, everybody knows who Jason Todd is, but and everybody knows who the Red Hood is, and everybody knows who Jason Todd the Robin is. There was a point where, as Robin, they still referred to him as Robin. There was a point where all the villains knew that, oh, it's Jason. And there's even a conversation, and this is the conversation, by the way, the same conversation where the Penguin gets his nose broken, where he calls, Jason not Robin. He's straight up, oh, there's Jason. It didn't matter that they knew who he was. However, the thing about him is, in terms of equipment, he's got his breastplate and everything, he's got his hood, but if he takes those things off or if he closes his coat, he looks like a regular, normal guy. He's wearing jeans. Yeah, he's wearing a gun holster, but he can take that off and hide a gun. He hides guns in his clothing, but at the end of the day, he's wearing regular clothing, and he uses this to his advantage. He dresses up as a homeless person. He dresses up as, a hiker. He does these things where he makes himself look like a normal, everyday individual. He makes himself look like a person that you'd walk by, you'd glance at them, and then continue walking. You wouldn't notice him. And he does it in the same way that Frank Castle, the Punisher, does. There's a lot of analogies and similarities that you can draw to him and to Frank Castle. They're both really good with guns. They specialize in assassination. They do stealth. They do reconnaissance. Their skill set. And Frank Castle's a Marine. Whether you're talking about the Vietnam version of him or you're talking about the Afghanistan conflict version of him. Either way, he's a Marine who's really good at what he does. Jason, he's not a Marine. He's just traveled and studied, but he's on par with that. He's gritty and he's grizzled, but he knows how to tone it down in such a way that he can blend in into regular society, to the point where people who know his normal identity, who know him as Robin, who know him as the Red Hood, even they don't recognize him. They're just like, oh, some homeless dude. Next thing you know, they're getting two black eyes and they realize, oh shit, that's actually Jason. I could go on about this character forever, but I'm going to cut it at the hour mark here. But there's a reason why there's a huge debate between Dick Grayson and Jason Todd as far as best Robin and favorite Robin. And, in a fight, of course, Dick Grayson wins. Because good will always triumph in the comic books, but it's neither here nor there. The other thing is it's kind of a 360 story here. Because everybody hated Jason Todd, the Robin. They felt he was worse in every way, when really he was just different, and he was a good different. And I personally, even as a young boy, could recognize that difference and enjoy it for what it was. But everybody loves the Red Hood Jason. and it's so much of a 360, because the story of him dying was literally up to a comic fan vote. DC Comics allowed people to vote on Jason Todd dying, and everybody voted yes. It was pretty much unanimous. It was a whopping 90.3% to 9.7%. So over 90% of the people who voted for Jason Todd to die. And that actually ended up being the best thing that could happen because, of course, he would become, the Red Hood and be resurrected and go on to have some of the best stories that everybody liked. And even in the animated series, Jason Todd was this intense individual. There's even a comic book line where, you know, Terry McGinnis, who's succeeded, who's at a point where he's cool, mystical, and edgy, and Bruce Wayne no longer has to teach him things. Bruce Wayne's confined to a chair at this point. He can't even walk around at a cane. And this was a teaser Justice League episode. But after this, Jason Todd comes back as someone who's also in his 50s, but unlike Tim Drake, he's really good at what he does. He's still able to continue doing what he does. And this is an alternative what if comic, by the way. But in this comic line, he basically becomes the main antagonist for Terry McGinnis. He's more experienced in every way. He has all the right skills. He's just really difficult for Terry McGinnis to deal with. And Terry McGinnis is at a point where he is the Batman that's better than Batman. And even then, he still just can't deal with a 50-ish, 60-ish year old Jason Todd. In this comic book line, too, another note here is he kind of takes this niche spot that's fills three different roles. It kind of fills three missing roles. He fills the role of the Joker, of Bane, and of Hush all at once. And this actually falls into the same comic line, sort of where his return was teased by Thomas Elliott. Thomas Elliott had Clayface pretend to be the Red Hood and then pretend to be Jason Todd and attack Batman. And this was the same time that Thomas Elliott had faked his death and become Hush. So, great comic. I want to fully explain this comic because it's fantastic and it's a long 2-hour read. So Hush knows that Jason Todd lives. Jason Todd goes to Hush. And Hush, goes to the Riddler to make things happen. So Hush is going to target Bruce Wayne and really fuck with him and just ruin his life as much as he can. And he gets information from Jason Todd, and this is what leads him to become Hush and to know that he can get revenge on Bruce Wayne in such a way, because before he's planning some totally normal plot that wouldn't have worked against Bruce Wayne because he didn't know that Bruce Wayne was Batman. But now he knows. So Hush goes to Riddler. Riddler sets up things that are creative that would mess with Batman. But Riddler also leads clues, which pisses Hush off. And Hush would work against the Joker and would try to frame the Joker. But the Riddler kind of clued the Joker in, which was a mistake. Because in the same comic book timeline, later the Joker would kill the Riddler. After Hush fails to fully hunt down the Riddler. And this is actually a branching timeline because in another timeline, Hush succeeds in killing the Riddler. There's two different timelines there. Really really difficult to follow that. There's all these what if scenarios. But Hush is this character who came the closest to killing Batman so far. And in this comic book line, he almost does. And not only does he do that, but he drives a wedge between Batman and Catwoman. That's a relationship romance as old as time. And he leaves kind of framing clues. He kind of frames Catwoman as this person who was in on it. She had a little bit of information, and some of it she didn't share with Batman, and that was a mistake on her end. There was some guilt in some areas and things, but Thomas Elliot frames it in such a way that it looks like she is involved. And Bruce Wayne, he almost get past Selina on this. He's like ready to marry her, right? And she says the worst thing that she could say. She tells him to hush. Thomas Elliot picked the name Hush specifically knowing that she would accidentally utter that phrase, because it's a phrase that she's said a lot. And he uses that as a code word with the Penguin, with Riddler, with all these other villains. And in doing so, fucks up the relationship and any chances that she had with Bruce. He just doesn't trust her just because she said that one word. Just really scheming and conniving. Thomas Elliot was a great villain for Bruce, and he goes so far as to basically hint at Jason Todd's return. He hints at the Lazarus Pit. He hints at all these things, and then he even and he wears this brown overcoat, this trench coat, and good body armor, and uses two Colt 45 1911s, twin barreled and everything. He does all of this, and so later Batman fights this what he thinks is Hush, and Hush removes the wrap around his head, and it's Jason Todd with his black mask and everything. He even stabs the shit out of Bruce Wayne with batarangs and all these things, and uses all these skills. And then Batman knows that he figures out mid-fight that it's Clayface. He figures it out because just things aren't adding up in the fight. Things are just slightly not correct. And so he tests his suspicions by almost breaking his no-kill rule. And this is at a point where Thomas Elliot had tricked Batman into almost killing the Joker. This is how close Hush came to ruining Batman. And if it wasn't for Jim Gordon, he would have killed the Joker. Really close. So he's already been messed with multiple times by Hush. But the thing is, Jason Todd is the one who put Hush up to this task. And he did it really well. At the end of the day, Bruce Wayne, he tests his theory on this fake Jason Todd by cracking its skull open, and sure enough, there's clay, But if it had been the real Jason Todd, then he would have broken his no-kill rule. That close. And in that regard, the Joker has always been Batman's senior. But Thomas has been better. He not only outwitted Batman and outwitted Catwoman, he also outwitted the Joker. He also outwitted Penguin. And pretty much had Clayface under control. He had Jason Todd to give him ideas and background. And Jason Todd wanted this to just really mess with Bruce and line him up to be vulnerable later. And the only reason why he did not succeed is because the Riddler. And Joker doesn't take too kindly to almost dying, and should have been killed, by the way, because of Riddler. So the Riddler now has to flee, and later probably gets murdered by the Joker, or later probably gets murdered by Hush. The Riddler has to go and flee and even seek out the protection of Lady Shiva and the League of Shadows. And even that's not enough to keep him from dying to either the Joker or to Thomas Elliot. Or in another timeline to Red Hood, because he's the one who fucked everything up for everybody. But in this whole entire comic book series, the one who's behind everything, and it's revealed later in this comic book series, that it is in fact Jason Todd who put Thomas Elliot up to this task, who showed him these things to strike at Bruce Wayne in a way that he would be emotionally vulnerable. And it culminates in this really fantastic fight. The Clayface version of Red Hood uses batarangs to stab Batman. He uses batarangs to stab Batman and things, and use them kind of like a knife. Um, you know, but those are just batarangs. They're not really meant for that. They're meant to be thrown. They're meant to disarm people. Uh, they're not meant for that task. You know, this version of Thomas Elliot using the Colt 1911s, the 45 caliber. Twin 1911s. One is designed for right hand use. The other one's chambered in such a way that cases eject from the left hand. That's done intentionally. The plastic explosive of choice that he uses is it's a low grade crude bomb, but that's what Thomas Elliot used. All these equipment choices, the military boots, the Kevlar vest, the overcoat, everything is designed to be slightly inferior to Jason Todd. And when Jason Todd fights Batman, he's got a titanium K-bar that he stabs the shit out of Batman with. He has not just two regular 1911s, he has modified 1911s, things that, long hammer, extended slide, everything about them is flawless. They're smooth. They're titanium silver nitrate coated, and titanium nitrate in firearms. In most firearms, they don't do anything, but unlike blowbacks, like the 1911 or the Thompson submachine gun, which Jason Todd uses, when it's used on that, it doesn't just look fancy. It actually improves the performance of the gun. It increases fire rate just slightly. If you watch Demolition Ranch, he actually got his Thompson gold plated with titanium nitrate. And he remarks that it's increased the fire rate, slightly, and it's also made things just run a little bit smoother, just slightly. But whoever wrote this comic book wrote a version of Jason Todd, and it's very clear that this person knows about guns, they know about explosives, they know about tactics. Really great comic, and honestly, it's probably like one of the pinnacle moments of Jason Todd, and this is where it went from Jason Todd to being one of my favorites to my favorite. But he has those 1911s. He has that Thompson that I mentioned. He's not wearing just any military boots. He's wearing modified military boots that are meant to be adjusted for his acrobatics. He's got his nanofiber bulletproof vest. He's got his exploding red hood. He has, instead of just using crude plastic explosive, he's using full on C4. He's using different technology and gadgets. There's one instance where Batman uses the grappling hook on him, and just like in the anime movie, his knife can cut right through it, but he cuts it before it becomes taut, and that's how he escapes. But there's another moment where he pulls a Joker. His gloves can be used to electrify things, and he uses that, and he catches Batman completely off guard with that. His belt buckle turns out to be a canister of thermite. You know, there's, his watch turns out to be folded and become a plasma cutter that can just shred through Batman's armor. Cape Cal and everything. There's moments with him where he uses conventional things like an RPG or just a everyday pistol or crude explosives, but there's moments where he's got things so modified and so tuned that even when Batman doesn't know he exists, he knows that this is someone far beyond any villain he's ever faced, because they have technology that only Batman could have. Only Robin could have this. They have things designed in such a way. Batman's cowl, for example, has night vision. And in some versions, his antenna actually has a built-in thing for echolocation, see people through walls, and see thermal recognition. Jason Todd has that too. Batman's got his supercomputer. Jason Todd has a hacker device that allows him to even break into the Batcave supercomputer. He takes these things, and Batman has an arsenal. Batman has shark repellent. Batman has a sticky glue gun that sticks people in place. He has his grappling hook. He has flashbangs. He has explosive batarangs. He has regular batarangs. He has an explosive glue jelly. He has thermal vision. He has echolocation. He has a jet fighter plane, and he has a walking arsenal. But it's all but if you take Jason Todd's overall arsenal from the comic books and everything, and from some of the animated movie stuff, his arsenal takes it way beyond. His arsenal is bigger than Frank Castle's arsenal. Okay, his arsenal is bigger than. You could take all the guns of Terminator, all of the guns of Frank Castle's whole thing. You can actually take all of the firearms ever used by Arnold Schwarzenegger in any movie and Sylvester Stallone, and you still wouldn't have Jason Todd's arsenal. The exploding head thing. I mean, Arnold takes off the mask, and the mask explodes. Jason Todd's Red Hood is not just a reference to the Joker; it's a really clever reference to Total Recall. Just small little moments. These writers built in these moments with Jason Todd and everything, where it's not just references to comic book villains past with Jason Todd. It's references to action movies. Like the moment he lights, Black Mask on fire with acid, basically. That's not a coincidence. That's a reference. That's a reference specifically to. I'm trying to think of it. Well, I'm having a total brain fart, but it's a reference to Marvel's Ghost Rider. That was it. And Ghost Rider has a flaming head. He has a skull. He has a skull head and a flaming head. They did that on purpose. When Ghost Rider turns into Ghost Rider for the first time, when Nicolas Cage was playing him, he acts like his face is burning and gas. If you look at the hand movements and how that's designed with Black Mask, it's exactly the same to Nicolas Cage's movements, where he clasps his face and it starts screaming like this. Fantastic. You don't just get this really excellent written character with an arsenal to rival any action hero ever, to completely outdo even Terminator. And yes, Jason Todd even has a minigun at some point. Uh, custom firearms and everything. You know, I feel like everybody who's ever written Jason Todd as the Red Hood actually had some level of understanding of firearms or of military tactics, because he's always well written in that way. Or somebody's watched every action hero movie ever. There is a blend of 1980s action hero and realism and grittiness, and then just references to other things with Jason Todd. There's even a one-liner in one of the comics with him where he's getting ready to kill a guy, and the guy's like, "I thought you said you were gonna kill me last," and he's like, "I lied." Literally ripped line for line out of the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie Commando. Um, there's another one where he sees Clayface, and he hasn't seen Clayface in years. Clayface transforms from a regular person into this abominable creature like he does. It's just normal Clayface. Jason Todd looks at that and goes, "You are one ugly motherfucker." Literally literally reference line verbatim to Predator. I love Jason Todd as this well-written character, but I love the references that he's based on, and I love what he does to any storyline. He's always been this driving force, whether it's him causing Batman to retire, or causing Batman to be different, or even killing the Batman, or even Batman to become a more flexible individual. Because there's one comic book line where you have Stephanie Brown, you have Tim Drake, you have Dick Grayson, and you have Damian Wayne. And, in this timeline, you also have Harley Quinn as part of the Bat family. You have all these characters. You have the Oracle. But Batman reaches this point where he's like, "I'm not going to kill people. But, Jason Todd, you're going to be kind of on your own. You're welcome to work with us. But, when you're around us, just don't kill any people." In other words, it's okay for Jason Todd, when he's not around the Bat family, to kill people. And, he's just like, Batman becomes less about true justice and arresting people, more about just stop the threat, arrest people I can, but if there's some other vigilante who's doing this, I'm just going to back up and leave it be. And, that flexibility with Jason Todd allows him to gain a flexibility of Harleen, Quinzel, or Harley Quinn. It allows him to take on a flexibility with what would become the third Batgirl, former Navy SEAL and demolitionist expert, and she would later, when she adopted this role, she took on the role of using rubber bullets, which mostly didn't become a problem, but allowed him to accept Damian Wayne and try to take Damian Wayne under his lead and try to get him to stop killing people. It allowed for a lot of things that Batman would have never done. And so it becomes this thing of Jason Todd in every version of Batman that Jason Todd exists. He affects Batman in some way. It lines up his story. He's a great. He's not just a character, a protagonist or an antagonist, depending on the story. But he's a plot point that everybody recognizes, and at some point it's going to change Batman. It's going to change up the story. He is a plot device, and all of it came about from a comic book vote of people just not liking what the character was at the time. They all voted to have him killed. Uh, and we almost, in a way, we almost didn't get that. Because if everybody had voted for Jason to live, we would have never gotten any of this. It's this one in a million character, and there is an alternate reality somewhere where I'm not making this video because Jason Todd doesn't exist. The Red Hood doesn't exist because people voted to let him live. And in that version, we probably would have gotten a Robin who retired from being a Robin. We probably would have gotten a way more boring storyline. The Red Hood Jason Todd that we have is kind of like proof that we're living in the best timeline, as terrible as things are nowadays. So, and that's just why, on top of everything, why he's my favorite Robin overall.